Thank you. Over here. All right, let's call the thing to order. We can make the minutes reflect everyone is present. We do have a quorum. Second item on the agenda. Army Corps PD, discussion on increasing water withdrawal.
Okay, I'm having trouble hearing you guys, but do you want us to go ahead?
Yes, please. I'm sorry.
Okay, I sent over a short presentation. Do you have that where you can share it on the screen? Or do you guys have copies of it? I think I see.
I got copies of it.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll just talk through it then and see what questions you guys have. So my name is Amanda Burt. I am the Water Supply Program Manager for the Nashville District, and I've been in that position a little over a year now. So still getting up to speed on a lot of it. But one of the major things that I've undertaken since taking over this position is a study on the moratorium at Old Hickory. So we will get into that if you want to look at the first slide with the background information. So to make sure that we're all on the same page, Old Hickory is a run-of-the-river project. So that means what water goes into it goes out of it. And that's as opposed to our storage projects that hold water long-term, like at Percy Priest or Center Hill. They store water behind the dam. Old Hickory, it just runs through it. So therefore, we cannot reallocate storage at Old Hickory like we can at those reservoir projects, which means that we don't do water agreements at our run-of-the-river projects like we do at Priest and Center Hill and those projects. Historically, we have allowed water withdrawals at our run-of-the-river projects as long as the originally authorized project purposes were not impacted. So at Old Hickory, that would have been navigation and hydropower. And like I said, we don't do storage agreements there. And also the Corps doesn't have any legal responsibility to operate that project for water supply. And currently we have 15 municipalities and industries withdrawing water from Old Hickory. So back to how the moratorium came into play was that by the year 2009, we had the extreme drought of 07 to 08. The navigation industry was reporting issues on the river. We had a model that showed that potentially more water was being withdrawn than was anticipated and kind of a threshold for navigation impacts. And additionally, Wolf Creek and Center Hill were both drawn down, which meant there was a whole lot less water coming down the river system than usual. So it was low water just because those large reservoir projects upstream weren't releasing water. So as a result, a temporary moratorium was issued on new or increased water from Old Hickory. It was intended to be temporary at least until Wolf Creek and Center Hill returned to their normal operations, but also until the Corps could do a study on water availability in the basin. So if you go to the next slide on the moratorium lift. So we have done a study over the last year and a half to evaluate navigation and hydropower impacts from existing and increased water supply withdrawals. The results there show that we can allow additional water supply withdrawals without impacting navigation or hydropower. So I definitely want to note here that our study only looked at those two originally authorized project purposes. And so as we get to the next slide, you'll see where that comes into play. But our commander has officially lifted the moratorium, which allows for new requests. So if we go to the next slide, in our path forward, I think you guys already know this because we've had a pre-application meeting with you all, but stakeholders may now apply for new or increased water from Old Hickory. And the way to do that is setting up a pre-application meeting, which we've been through. And so here's where the impacts come into play, is that applications will be evaluated according to our existing processes. They're not guaranteed approval, because that review targets all kinds of things like public interest, environmental laws, there's TDEC permits you have to receive, coordination with other agencies, et cetera. So there's a whole lot more that's looked at in this application process than just the impacts to navigation and hydropower. Our target for completing review of an application is 120 days, but that can vary if there's back and forth with the applicant, or if it's complicated or anything like that. But our goal would be to turn it around in 120 days. And then before we move into kind of the requirements for an application, I do want to say, and I think I said it at the pre-application meeting, but the moratorium is lifted, and we do anticipate, as far as a quantity of water, being able to accommodate any requests that we receive in the near term. So it's not like you have to race to get your application in before your neighbor or anything like that. So we want to make sure that you have a good application, that, you know, your needs analysis and alternatives, all of that is well defined. So it makes for a smoother application process. Okay, we'll move into the next slide, and I won't necessarily go through all of this in detail because we did it at the pre-application meeting, but feel free to ask any questions. So the first slide of the pre-application meeting information was a list of all the things that would be required to be a part of your application. So it has a link to where that application is on our website. And then just things like your detailed plans and drawings, the size of your pump, the establishment of that water need. So, you know, we don't want you asking for 20 million gallons a day if your real need is 4. A map with the coordinates, photographs, profile elevations, etc. And then also down at the bottom is also the link to the TDEC ARAP application as well. On the next slide is a water withdrawal request data sheet. And that is just additional information specifically about usage, what your expected average usage is. If you're returning water to Old Hickory, that's really important, because when we evaluate impacts, it's looking at a net usage. And drought contingency plan is important there, because again, we're not legally obligated to operate Old Hickory for water supply. And again, location. So a little bit of this information is redundant from the first page. And then the last page is a list of drawings that would be needed. So it kind of goes into more depth about one of the items on the first page. Okay, what questions do y'all have? I know a couple of you, I think I see in there, were at the pre-application meeting, but wanted to be able to clear up any questions you all have.
So you kind of mentioned there's no need to race our neighbors, so there is not going to be any kind of overall limit for increased withdrawal requests. If there's 15 approved entities right now, if they do all come to a real need of 20 million gallons each, is there an upper limit, or is that, how real is that statement? I guess we don't need to race.
Yeah. So that's a good question, and our analysis technically does have a number, but it's not a number we're releasing because it can change. We plan on updating the modeling every 5 years. And so if we have an extreme drought, if hydrology in the basin changes, et cetera, there's a lot of things that could affect that number. But what I do know is that it's significantly more than's being withdrawn right now. We've had some estimates on inquiries that we've gotten from, I think you guys even had an inquiry in the last 10 years, and some of the other municipalities up, especially in you guys' region. And so we kind of have a number that we're expecting to come in, and it's significantly more than that we would be able to allow from a quantity perspective.
Tommy, do we have policies for drought? Where, I don't know anything, thinking about California, that, all the things they do out west when they're in drought. We have something we would kick into gear during.
We got one, we probably ain't never have to use a whole lot of them. A lot of them are designed to start experience. You'll have a lake, in a lake or any body of water at any certain level that you get to keep a marker. You'll have a trigger point. You'll want to say you need to, customers need to voluntarily restrict themselves. If it hits another trigger point, they'll say you're mandated to restrict yourself, and you'll have to monitor that. That's usually how they work.
There may be a list of things that, I don't know, things that we would want to include in our application. Is there weight to any of it? Like we have a policy for drought conditions. If we improve that policy or make it more restrictive, would that make our application be more receptive to our application? Maybe not just policy, but I think we heard maybe the need to make it more of our water system, more of a, what do you call it? Regional source. Like, is there a list or some kind of weighted items that y'all are going to look at in that regard for things that we need to include, I guess? Does that make sense?
Robby, I think that might be a better question for you. So Robby Baker from TDEC is also on the line. And as far as from the Corps' perspective, there's not anything that it's going to weight it better than the other. So I think more of that would come into play in the TDEC permit. So I'll let Robby speak to that.
Sure. Thank you, Amanda. So I'm Robby Baker with TDEC Water Resources. So I think, no, not particularly. I think what we're dealing with Old Hickory, kind of like Amanda suggests, is that there's ample water available for our immediate needs. Really what I think, as much as anything else, we want to take advantage of this opportunity. So when we talk regionalization, in some ways we're trying to advance the notion of making sure that the region can get water from Old Hickory, whether that's through person groups or municipalities like Hartsville and in Portland. So we met with Portland the other day. Whether that's directly or like for instance Lafayette. Would Lafayette need to build a raw water pipe to the Cumberland, or would they just buy water from you? Either way, Lafayette gets water out of the Cumberland, and so those are opportunities that we want to explore. I think TDEC does, through its SRF, have the ability to incentivize through loan forgiveness and some other things, applications that have a regional context. So, for instance, but regionalization isn't necessarily where Hartsville goes, well, we're gonna put ample additional capacity in so that when people need it, we can sell it to them. That's not really what we're looking for, because what we're really looking for are agreements, asset sharing and cost sharing, for instance. So that's more what regionalization is more about cost and asset sharing. And cost sharing can benefit. I mean, Hartsville's in a good position. It's close to the river, and it doesn't necessarily have to share costs with anybody in order to get more water. I don't even know if y'all are thinking about a new intake or just upgrading your pumps and so forth. So the main thing though, at this initial kind of this, I'm going to call this kind of an initial phase post moratorium. The main thing we really want to get is just a good permit application where you're explaining clearly what it is you're proposing. You know, for instance, new intake, not a new intake. I reviewed an application today that does involve a new intake. And it took me a while to get really good plans for the intake so we could see, because one facet of this permit is not just withdrawing water, but it's also the physical impact of it. For instance, if you're building a new intake, of working in the lake, you know, that's a physical construction in the lake or in the reservoir that has its own water quality impacts. This other one I'm reviewing today, the construction of the intake is a fairly significant impact. So in any case, the plans are important. And one last thing I'll say about drought management. It's my experience on the Duck River that it's not fair for one of the utilities on the Duck River to have a robust drought management plan that they're going to adhere to and police, and all the rest of them not, because they're all suffering from the same lack of water. And so I think it's only fair for, in this phase of permitting, if we permit three new increases, then I think the ARAP permit is going to insist on a drought management plan, and they're going to be the same for everybody. And it might even go to triggers, not necessarily drought triggers so much as flow triggers in Old Hickory. Those might be the triggers that we would want to use for drought management, because in the Duck River, they use the Normandy Reservoir as triggers for the drought management. So I think we may be looking at something like that, but it is, so TDEC will insist on a drought management plan for that reason, so that, and it also, I think from the Corps' perspective, it also helps the Corps maintain its congressionally authorized uses of the reservoir. So, and then that, for me, that makes sense to base it on flow triggers, because interestingly, water supply was not one of those congressionally authorized purposes. That's been a problem across Tennessee and the TVA and Corps reservoirs, but that's nothing that we can't overcome. But that is something that the Corps has to definitely adhere to. So no, there's not any particular. You're probably not going to get denied a permit, because what would really, and as Amanda was talking about, what really makes, when she's talking about 120-day turnaround, that's from a complete application. So the better the application is, the easier it is for these agencies to turn this application around, because they're not going back and forth on trying to get new information. So that's pretty important. So that's, and finally, and I'll quit talking, I think another thing that it's important to understand, especially for your planning, and it goes back to what Amanda said about that the Corps cannot guarantee water availability, and that is that it's not an allocation. So when the Corps grants you access to this water, or TDEC issues a permit, it's not an allocation. It can be effective as an allocation, but what happens is it's really a permit that authorizes you to alter the Cumberland River by taking water from it. It's really not an allocation, and the significance of that is going back to there's no guarantee. So if the Corps has to limit withdrawals, or if the drought management plan has to limit withdrawals because we're at a really low flow, then you can't be arguing, but wait, I've got this allocation. It doesn't work that way. This is because there's a distinction between Western prior appropriation states where you could argue that, and the Eastern riparian law where you can't really argue that. All you've got is a permit, a stream alteration permit from TDEC and a license from the Corps to get water out of the reservoir, but you're not guaranteed. And that's just it probably doesn't come into play with this effort here. It just doesn't come into play. But it's important to understand for your planning purposes. If you're planning a 50 MGD plant and so forth, and one day that water is not available to you, or TDEC refuses to permit that 50 MGD that you've got the capacity for, because TDEC is going to be permitting your need, not necessarily your capacity. We're most interested in your pumps. So, so for instance, what happens to the Cumberland River when you flip on the pumps? Well, not much, because there's plenty of water in the Cumberland River. But if we were on a smaller stream like the Duck River, it does change the amount of water in the river, and it has biological impacts and so forth, and impacts on users downstream. So it won't. So that's the reason. And I'll circle back around to the end. So it's not going to matter much on the Cumberland River. There's room for a permit in there. We just need a really good application that has details and provides the information that is requested. I think my deputy director sent Tommy. I think she sent you a list of stuff needed in an ARAP application, and that was a little bit of an old document. And I've got a newer document that gives her that's a little bit more clear about needs, and because it breaks about what goes into the applications. There's not going to be a whole lot of fussing about even need, and before I stop talking, there's TDEC is wanting communities in their planning process to look down the road, to have at least a 20-year planning horizon, if not a longer planning horizon. On the other hand, TDEC doesn't really want to encourage the field of dreams scenario of if we build it, they'll come. We don't necessarily want to encourage you to build capacity for potential. We want you to build capacity for existing need and future need based upon your planning. So that's where it can even include your regional. So if you have regional goals of asset and cost sharing, then that could justify more water, of course, and changes your long-term planning. So that's about it. This is just, and I'll stop with, this is a great opportunity for these northern tier counties along the Cumberland River. I know that Lafayette, Red Boiling, Hermitage, all those places, Westmoreland, they're all needing water, and how they get to it, whether to the Cumberland River, whether it's through you guys or independently, but it just would make more sense if all of the utilities work together in some form or fashion, through agreements, through asset sharing, through some form of fashion, to work together to make sure that others can get water. And I think that benefits everybody. Okay, I'm done.
Any questions? You will forward that document, won't you, Mr. Baker?
Sir?
The new ARAP document you're talking about, the newer one, you'll forward that?
I will.
Thank you. One question, it talks about cultural and environmental impacts. Is that something we do, or is that, how detailed does that have to be? The cultural and environmental impact.
Okay, yeah, so the cultural environmental impacts, it really depends on if you're using the existing intake. Probably a lot of that refers to on our regulatory permit, we're going to want to know what streams are being impacted, what wetlands might be impacted. So if you're building a new facility, you might impact wetlands. Those are a big part of it. We do have, depending on whether, it's a new build or if it's existing, it might require a phase 1 archaeological assessment, or if you're removing trees, we need to know what trees are being removed. So did that answer your question?
I think my main question is how detailed that had to be. Whether it had to be a full-blown engineering study or just a statement saying it should not have any significant impact on an engineer would suffice.
Yeah, so I think it's going to depend on how.
Going to depend on the scope of the project.
Okay. So I think it kind of depends on where y'all are end up going with this. If y'all are using the existing intake, you're probably going to look at very little impact at all. And we can probably, have our planning office do a site visit. If it's more extensive, it kind of depends on the amount of impact. Amanda, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. I was just going to say, once you get ready to start pulling your information together, when you know if you're upgrading or doing a new intake or something, we'd be happy. The environmental section is in my office, so I could, give you a contact person so you could talk to them in advance and see what kind of information they're going to be looking for, so you get it right the first time.
Well, and that brings up a point. So if you're going to be running new pipeline, those pipelines are probably going to cross creeks, and that'll have to be part of the application. That's another aquatic resource impact, or another impact to waters of the United States and so forth. So new pipelines, new building construction, all that stuff is the one that requires the cultural and the other kind of environmental impact more so. And so, yeah, so new stuff, new earth moving is where you really start getting into more of the environmental and cultural.
One other question, does Old Hickory go dam to dam? Does it end and there's a part of the river or any part of the river that's between the dams would be considered Old Hickory? That was my opinion. I just want to make sure I was clear on that.
Yes,
Right,
Old Hickory is
dam
to dam.
Thank you. I like saying that. It was just fun to say that, dam to dam.
It's a good
Well,
question.
plus that makes it easier to know where Old Hickory ends and Cordell Hall begins.
All right. Well, thank you all so very much for your time. We really appreciate all the information you provide to us. And
Appreciate you having us.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to reach out if y'all have more questions. We'll be happy to help you through this process. We want to help you through this process. So, so let us know.
all right. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
And we'll be in touch. Sounds like it's something they're willing to do. We just gotta make sure we get out.
I remember if that old plan was doing a new intake and all that, plan I did 10 years ago.
No, that was something.
Upgrading pump
But
station.
there's only going to be. Basically, I just think it's superficial impact or actual impact. It looks like, if I understood what our meeting was, we probably wouldn't be doing a record at all if our intake will have to be modified, it's just still repeat it. Right. They keep saying 120 days, I wouldn't hold my head on that at all. No, I wouldn't. I'm just telling you. I wouldn't hold my head on that 5 years in a week.
Well, so many things, these type applications, you'll send it in, they'll tell you what you need, and, oh, well, you didn't do this, oh, you didn't do this, and they keep dribbling these things back, and environmental, you know, and that, why, question about that, so we get it in.
Any other discussion?
Good luck with that. That's right. We appreciate it.
Well, I will say they seemed very positive, you know, I mean, it wasn't like, well, you know, you might have a chance at this, they were
I didn't
very,
take it that way.
I didn't either, I
You
felt
just have
like,
some homework.
if you do the things that need to be done, you're gonna probably get this.
The core is positive. I don't know how much TX is. TX should know.
What?
They're the ones that's really doing the burnout. The core is gonna go along with TX. The TX recommends place like this. TX is gonna be one really function on this. That's what me and Tommy took out of it.
Well, I see that, I get that.
See, they were with the core.
Most of those were with the core.
The guy was,
How did we come up with the study to know that we had the need to do that?
We know how, what your customer base is. You've got population projections. So you're gonna know what your need is in 20 years. And then you're gonna have to figure out from the ones that spoke to you, what their plans are and pull them. If you had to do it, you could do them.
well, the two things we're gonna have to look at for sure is our growth, which is far exceeding anyone in the state, plus the impacts of large industries out of the regional site out there that a lot of others are not gonna have that to fall back on. So I think we're in a good position to show the need.
And right now, I mean, you could show all kinds of water. More than you can true.
Alright, what's our action on this? We're gonna talk about this more next month, or?
We're gonna start working towards seeing what that impact
Yeah,
is like.
we'll get a list of it.
We'll see how this together.
We'll get the long checklist.
Get go through there. One reason I asked y'all to approve this last meeting is that gets us started on that letter requesting it from us, letter is, we're gonna do some initial work and see what we need.
Talk about all that.
The fees from them are $6,500, I think.
I think it's worst case scenario.
85 was from the core, worst case, 1,000 is individual from the. So that really wasn't as bad as this.
No, it's like we want some.
That's all it is, do it.
I think we should get one there, yeah. We might need to look what his takes in and then
Yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to sit down and see
what his effort is, he needs to look at that on his side. You know what I mean, compare how long.
the initial probably isn't that bad. Well, they're going to require that to be done.
All that other stuff come back.
But they may have it all in a list form with it. You know, he's supposed to send it.
Approval to accept bid for office / shop building. The, bids are provided last month, I think it's in this paper too, right? The budget.
You know, go through them, if you want.
If you don't mind, just.
We had two submit on the, garage / office building. Phoenix Commercial Builders was their low bidder, $1,243,700. That includes the building package. If you take the building package out, in other words, y'all buy the building package to be tax exempt on the building package, it's $111,100 for the two bills. That leaves you with $1.13 $1,132,600. The second bidder was W&O Construction. Their base bid, that includes the building package, them paying for, or them including the building package, $1,288,000. If you take their building package out, $73,000. That leaves you with a low bid for them, $1,215,000. That kind of summarizes it. The bids and what that details is. We've checked on references on both. Phoenix builders sent us a slew of stuff they did. We had to try to find contacts. Everybody we called gave them, for the most part, a positive. Everybody kind of said they would use them again. There was no huge red flags, and that's what we got from the ones that we called. Where are they located? They're out of Lebanon. They have done a lot of churches. They have done environmental science for Melbourne BSCO posts and stuff there. They're no longer in business, so I couldn't get a hold of them. Paces to the numbers. Anybody that would need something else. That's what we run into with a lot of them. Nobody really, when you call them, it's hard to find out. It's hard to get a real reference because nobody, when you call them, usually you can't get your way up the ladder to figure out who even knew about the project stuff. So they've been in business since 2003. I've never worked with them before. W&O has been in business since probably about 80s. They have a rating, but there's no nobody has ever reported on it. So that's still no rating. So there's no reviews of the way for their business. W&O has built water plants, sewer plants, they've built everything. So I have worked with them in the past. As far as what the bids come in, I think everybody's aware of them coming in high. I can't tell you if it's going to go down in 6 months. I can tell you the building package itself is about 26 to 30 weeks out just to get this deal. If you want to do it tomorrow. So that has come up about 50% as what suppliers and stuff like. So it's costing 50% more. So supply and demand kind of thing on everything else. So I'm not comfortable telling you to hold off and wait, you might save or what. I don't think nobody right now is going to tell you which way to go on the bid, but I do feel like it come in basically $250 a square foot. I feel like that is really high. That's the base number. And they both close, so I mean, there's not a wide. No, so I mean, it lets you know that you're pretty much coming in with a good number. There wasn't something there that really throw them off. You said you had worked with the building that been in business on. I'm going to say 70s or 80s. I can look it up for you. I know I've had experience doing that. I've never been dealing with them. They built their water plant expansion. They worked here too, I think. They did. I worked with them on station. I know there's $45,000 reputation of that. Work. Well, they're lower than the other one, no? No, they're just a little bit higher. I'd say because of the difference in the deduct on the building package. On the building package. And your price is going to come out. Your price is going to come out of that deduct. So whatever they give you there is not necessarily what you're going to pay. So don't have that held down in your mind that you're going to pay 73,000. They're saying they'll take 73,000 out of their bid for y'all to buy them building package. I mean, y'all go to order the building package, it could be. Well, it ain't gonna be that, I didn't think it'd be that bad, but, I mean, you're gonna be somewhere in the ballpark of the two of them, you're gonna be somewhere between. They're just willing to, you know, say, don't pay 73,000 up in order. So,
They have this order, rebuilding that, and all parts on the table, I did not even know that they were coming. And there's three, and if I need to recuse myself because, as a customer there, I would do so. But, my maintenance payment that I would change city government that was built with city funds, it was a design to build. Now, is this technically called a design to build?
we don't know that.
Okay, so it was a design to build, and then we had, and that was a government, no grant. I don't believe we had any grants on it. It was straight city funds. But then we used this building ever since it was built, and then we have two other new buildings being built on the airfield currently as we speak. One has a steel and cement and concrete, and the third one is on the concrete. Steve Robinson.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Steve Robinson is on that Julia. So, we're going to quality product. Like I said, I didn't know that. I'm shocked you didn't know my phone.
Well, when we first started talking about this, it was 500, and we revised it up to 8, and, I had thoroughly expected these numbers. I think I made that aware of everybody early on. So I'm certainly not shocked by these numbers. But, I think it's a big investment, and there again, I think we need to, do we have the money to do this big project, with the other things that we have ahead of us? Is there other funding that we can draw from other sources for this? All of those things come into play. Now, whether it will, no one has a crystal ball, whether prices are going to be down. What I've read is they expect things to stabilize and go backwards, but not to the extent that they were. You know, and I think might be something that we need to, of course, take the time lag of trying to order the structure building, and I don't know, I'm all over the map. I really am.
What's the absolute need on this building? I know we need to create our own space, we need it for the equipment storage and everything else, but we're not getting kicked out of this building in 6 months, right?
It's more than storing equipment.
We can kind of stay put and keep doing things how we're doing for 6 months or a year, and nothing stopping us, right?
Isn't it all the time?
Storage and maintaining or just storage?
All your equipment on the way.
Right, but you will be maintaining your craft in this space as well.
It'll be staying. There'll be some, we'll be moving all our,
Yeah,
the
shop in
mayor was
there.
asking me, all the materials will come up here. We did build, 80 to 30 building, the store bulky material, it won't come here, it'll go down to the plant. We're start putting in fire hydrants, where they're in there now. Cleaning the room and the little storage building, that's store lockers. That's why we kind of built it, and we didn't get the extra plan to go with it. That's right, so we're trying to get from the neighborhood and want to get one of those. For sure, situations like that.
As far as storage, can we not, rent or lease some space, at PowerCom or somewhere else? I mean, we've got a lot of warehouses That's what I'm saying, there's a lot that's,
That's what it's like, yeah.
even on a short, I'm not talking about long term, I'm talking about short term, to look at prices. I know that's not the most convenient thing for you guys, and, it's just kind of all about options. We got an option, more than question, statement. I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm voting no on this. I cannot spend this amount of money for this. That might be a political decision, but if we do this, that man will not be reelected. And I want him reelected, and I'll say that for now. This would be such a political hot button. You think you saw Firestorm when we spent $600,000 on this building, maybe two to store some trucks in? It's a little wild. No, 600 was.
Well, 600 was the purchase price. I think 675, and there was some bells and whistles that had to be done and renovations that were done, so that pushed it up.
It still wasn't me.
Scared the hell out of it.
I know.
This right here was a bigger mistake than this would ever be. And I don't think this would really affect his reelection. His performance is gonna dictate his reelection. I mean, I'm fine with waiting 6 months to see if prices stabilize and doesn't go backwards, but with the full awareness that in 6 months, we're still looking at these numbers or lower. And I understand when they first started talking about it, it was 500, then it moved to 800, but this was just a victim of time. And if we'd have done it then, we'd save a lot of money, but we didn't. So now we're here.
You say what now?
30 weeks. Just to get the student. Can we afford this without a rate hike?
Yeah, well, we got 2 million to spend on our,
Money
market account, and then,
How much do we have to have in reserve? We're required to have a certain amount of reserve.
we're only enough to cover the loans. That's like almost 4 million. out there. The more you build, you're gonna have to eventually pull the trigger on raising rates. It's whether you build this building or build a water plant, build a tank, you're gonna have to pull the trigger on raising rates some point in time. You have unlimited funds, they've got no tank, and they've got no payroll.
I'm inclined to kind of wait to see what prices are gonna go. Roll the dice, you know, it's probably a gamble. Could it go up in 6 months or a year for the same project? I'm hoping, maybe it's just a hope, that we see prices come down.
Houston County was just published the 5th fastest growing county in the nation. I can't see that we're gonna go down anytime soon. All we're gonna see is a limit to those who don't live in Wilson County, and that's gonna put the burden on our water department. And I believe it's in the best interest for us to protect the equipment for that, what we've already purchased, what they've already purchased to provide the services that they service all of us with water and sewer. I believe in the building. I'm not scared of $1.2 million. A taller, larger building has been built for more in Lebanon, and I believe in protecting your equipment and protecting your team and keeping your team out of the weather when they're working on their equipment. And I think that's what part of what this project will do. And then I believe there's also unity in bringing all the team together. I believe in the building. I believe in the product. I believe in the mission. $1.2 million is a lot of money, but it's our job to serve this community. And if we didn't step on this board to serve this community for their future, then we don't need to be here. And I understand your position and I understand the mayor's position, but we've got to protect what we've got so that we don't not have, so that we're not behind. This is a money-making department That's what they do. They have the money, and the other departments within this city and county can benefit from them removing from where they're at and broaden services.
Well, I just feel like the building is the only infrastructure.
Exactly.
Equipment that wears out, depreciation. I mean, this, you know, this isn't like 1.2 million on some bulldozers, or something that you're gonna run out and wear out and tear up. Everybody's gonna be mad if you raise rates, but rates need to come up anyway. Same thing with property tax. Nobody wants to raise it because nobody wants to be the bad guy, but if you raise a little at a time, people tend to swallow it a little better than no tax increase for 10 years and you get in here with a shovel. Just my opinion.
It is an investment.
It's huge investment.
In my mind, it was an unexpected investment, or not unexpected in my part, but obviously on Board's part, we never, you know, we weren't talking about $1.2 million when we started. Why were we not talking about $1.2 million? I know things have went up a lot, but they ain't went up that much.
Didn't we have some add-ons in that? So, when we first started, no one was talking 500,000, 600,000. Didn't we have add-ons to that? Because when we were talking 5, I think it was just the shop building, if I remember correctly. And then we moved to putting the offices in. Then that bumped it to the 7, right?
We had a drive-through and a teller counter.
Right.
I mean, and your bidders could tell you, maybe, what you say, not doing that.
Yeah, I'm not leaning that way. I'm not leaning towards not doing the shed. I know we keep talking about the 500,000, but I don't think that's a realistic number. It wasn't the complete building that we're talking about right now. I know it is significantly higher, but it was not, 500,000 was not the complete building. I don't remember that being that way, to be mistaken. I'm trying to remember what the complete building package, what we were thinking, everything was, all the add-ons and everything was accounted for then, and I think it was like 7.
Well, I think we had conversations right here.
Yeah.
750 to 800 was what, you know, and I made the statement, I want to see the person that built this building for $800,000.
Right.
That's when I made the statement, it'd been $1.2 million,
Right.
at least. And, you know, I don't want to say I told you so, but I told you so. But if that makes no difference, whether it's 800 or $1.2 million or $1.5 million or $2 million, I don't know, does the price ever get to where it's not worth revisiting, waiting? I don't know. I mean, if y'all are good with $1.2 million, I mean, I guess I should be as well, but,
I think it's a good price for today. It was a window in time. It was a price. We got 2 bids. They're within 50 grand of each other. It's not a,
like I said,
not
I'm not surprised by it.
outlandish
I
price.
am not surprised by it at all. If anything, I'm surprised it came in at that. But, you know, I think they're kind of taking a gamble that these prices are gonna come down before they ever get this thing and get started on it.
It's certainly good. If you're talking about Phoenix, it's certainly building 3 buildings, like, that are very compatible to the access moment. He's feeling the pain of building. And I've not, like I said before, I've not spoken with him about this project. Maybe
If we
I don't
order,
know.
if we order the buildings ourselves, like you were talking about there, will we pay what we ordered at or what the price is at the time it's delivered?
You will pay, it's turnkey. So when you buy it, that's what you will pay. They're using big, both bidders, so they're using big, I'm not sure y'all about.
So if we order it from Bigby today for a price, it can't go up and it can't go down.
You have the steel package itself.
The package and lock it in and
Yeah, with them, I mean, they're gonna tell you that it's gonna be delivered over here.
But I'm saying, okay, if they all of a sudden still appreciably goes down, again, 30%, 50%, 10%,
You don't know.
you done bought it, you can't cancel it.
Now, I'd say there is I can find out, I'm sure there's so many days in the cancel, they're gonna do that one. Because they start doing their design on what size, so then they can.
That's what I thought, I just wanted to be sure I wasn't thinking wrong.
But like, again, they're gonna get it. That's why it's so high. They can get the steel, that's why it's so, they're saying that the steel is what's driving them a lot.
If we order the building, they're saying 30 weeks, that turns into 52, that turns into 60. Where's our deal with these other guys? Is there a time limit on it?
If you approve it today, it's not.
Or,
For the project. So, yeah, you got a contract on it. They can only guarantee it 60 days. You can make it 60 days from the time you choose it. That project. Once you sign a contract.
Even if it takes 2 years to build it back.
Oh, no, they're saying 30 days, 30 weeks is literally on.
But what Dwight's saying, things go south, and I fully expect it to happen. They go for 30 weeks a year before they can deliver the steel. We're locked in on their price though now.
hold on.
They got 300 days.
Less than a year. So if you go over that, you're gonna have to rebid it.
No, they get it for those things.
Maybe we should let them order it.
How much would it realistically save us if we bought space?
Taxes.
How much?
10%.
Then have not be overriding the contract with a contractor by the time. Exactly,
You
yeah.
can't, you're not taxing it. You have to do it.
Again, we don't have to, they have.
They're gonna charge you 10%.
Yeah,
They got
we can resell that for a
It's just a spot on the side.
That's something to wait for.
I'm guessing on these two bids, there's one building for 101. They use the same manufacturer. One at 111,100. And that even number, and one at 73,000 exactly. I'm guessing that 73 is just
That's when you
just
can
a
pull out.
swag number just to put out there. So that metal building's gonna cost around $100,000 for us. So maybe we save 10 grand total cost. This is just a guess, 10 grand total contract on that ourselves.
I would let them buy.
Definitely know what's saying, look, we'll give you 72,000 off. If y'all wanna buy it.
Yeah.
Or you
Let the
can pay
contractor
us
do the
and
contract, and that's what they do.
Not with the way that.
I'm not waiting 6 months. I don't see it changing in 6 months.
But I don't want a project on the shelf either.
I mean, I think at some point we gotta do something, make the other people comfortable. I'd be okay with waiting 6 months till prices come down. I don't see them coming down. I think we're gonna be right back here in 6 months. At best, looking at these same numbers.
Most of it will be bidded if you.
Oh, yeah, you'll have to remove it.
Like I said, the price of it did not shock me. If we have the money to do that, that is the issue that I have to reconcile in my mind, because it is a big difference in the money that we have budgeted for. That's kind of what I think. And I've never been real fearful of political ramifications in my life, but, you know, I'm here by position. I'm here as chairman of the commission. If we have a new chairman of the commission, y'all can give it to somebody else. But I just don't want to unnecessarily, we've got to be able to explain this. And you did a good job explaining it. We all have to have our elevator speech to explain this if we do it. Because there are going to be a lot of people that are going to be good for it.
Conflict with constituents is what we bring to the table. Both the growth of the community, and the growth of the department alone is about space. I don't think that we need to jump on this right now before it gets any worse. And I mean the burden on the team, the burden on the department. That's what's that.
Well, I think we finally got something that we all pretty much agree on is what we need to do. We knew it was going to cost more than what we initially thought. That's without a doubt. 6 months from now, it could be twice what it is now. You just don't know. I mean, you have to go with the data that you have at the time that you make the decision. You can't second guess it. You have to go with it. Like I say, my biggest question, the extra dollars that it's going to cost is not going to be an issue, a burden now, or a burden to come a year from now. You know, you're sitting here saying we got the money to do this, and because we do this, you know, we're not going to have to come back in here a year from now and raise the rates because we did it. Then I'm okay with it.
I don't think we're going to have to raise our rates until the building. I think we're going to have to raise our rates because there's so many people making it. And we need to repair the lines that we have today. We already talked about how you're.
We quantified a lot of water stuff. We never quantified sewer glasses. That costs money. We might have got close to quantifying what it's going to cost for the sewer system. You ain't got enough money. Nobody does. I mean, we don't. That's going to save us all with the infrastructure. Billions of dollars to fix all that stuff, I'm sure. As long as there's a daycare involved with it.
Plan better than no plan, brother.
I got that. If we got a daycare building, we can get some federal funds. I just.
I'm right.
Well, I've said more than chasing the rabbit now, but what do y'all think? What do you guys think? Is that a discussion? Anybody got any other serious discussion about this?
I would like to add whether I get booted out or not should not factor into this decision. I see the need for it. I went down there behind the sheriff's department. I looked at the building. We've got our equipment in as far as the pipes and all that kind of stuff and valves, and you know, it looks like somebody built a vacuum barn. So it will be better to have that equipment put up somewhere, and some equipment's outside, it's not time to see it, and it can be better to have it under the roof, it's gonna last longer and whatnot, gives them a place to maintain it. So I see the value in the building itself. I'm a little bit concerned with it's gonna be somewhat landlocked and you're not gonna have that expansion potential, and I know they bought that property out on Courier Bend, but then again, you're gonna have separate locations, you're still gonna have your office operations here, but everybody else is going to be out that shop building on Courier Bend. So that kind of goes, I know Heather talked about having everybody on one roof. you go that route, you're probably not gonna have them, because I don't see a lot of people want to drive out of Prairie Bend to pay their water bill.
Yeah, Dropbox, it's not outside of the parking lot.
I'm fighting a battle with myself. I kind of anticipated it being around this number, given what we've seen, and it's not just, we're not just fighting Trousdale County for the steel, we're fighting Davidson County, we're fighting everybody else across the country trying to get the steel. That's why the prices are so high, you don't have it being manufactured as quickly. So that's why the prices have shot up. And just think of all the, we go through Nashville, my wife and I did on Saturday evening, I can't remember driving through and that building wasn't here, that building wasn't there, that building wasn't there, and they're still building more, and that's where all this, and we're fighting with them to get the steel too, that's where the prices are coming in. I don't think you're gonna see that price come down very much in 6 months. I don't think you're gonna see it, not with how we're exploding in this, in Tennessee, and particularly in Middle Tennessee. I don't think you're gonna see it come down very much, if at all. So my next question would be, Tommy, are you looking like more just use some of the funds we've got, whether it's money market and all these other funds we've got, to just go ahead and pay for this, or are you looking to finance it? And if we're looking at financing it, what's it gonna be, 20 years, 15 years? So I think I was looking at 15 years using the number we got here, the $1,243,000, that's $82,913.33. But that's not including all these other costs and fees and interest rates that goes with it.
The big ones just, paying out all that cash for it. No way that we're not talking about money. If you finance it yourself, you don't have an interest rate, you don't have to loan pay back, you're gonna have to appreciate it anyway. So all you got here is just appreciating it, putting it back to pay it back to yourself for the future. So you don't have a loan and an interest rate to pay back.
Well, the loan will cost us more than we're getting interest on this money sitting in the bank, I guarantee you that. It's ridiculous to borrow money and move out of money.
We have a discussion next month about the water plant and all that other stuff.
I sent y'all a copy of that. Your plan, it's not saying that's a working plan, but both of it, the plant's one of the biggest projects in there. And y'all had a number from that original, Bars Wagner had a number for that plant to be built with $8 million, it was over on. Should have built it, no way. Started it. They can half the cost. The regional concept we talked about, that's a different story, but you know what, if you could do that and that worked out, or you could get all that worked out, it could help you to fund all that. That's kind of where they was going back then.
I've seen it. I mean, I haven't hired them, Steve hired them. You need a motion. Something, you need a motion or something for us to.
Well, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I don't know if we need to have any discussion, but before a motion is made, or is there any discussion on the builder that we use? I feel like, I think in either case, when we purchase the building, we'll have to include it. Phoenix is the low guy in either situation, so. Just a note for whoever makes the motion, if you are having whichever contractor you like, or who you use. I like Phoenix personally, I don't know anything about the two of them, but sounds like they're doing a lot of work, and they're just as capable for this particular project as maybe that.
So you think they should let them purchase that building, maybe?
I would.
Some of them, yeah.
I'll make a motion that we approve Phoenix Builder for the construction of a new building for the water department, allowing them to go ahead and purchase the school building within their name, and which is a little operation in the bill. Thank you.
Yes, we do, actually.
2437. 2437.
I'll second it. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No.
No, that's a chicken way out.
Pretty brave, isn't it?
A lot of money, that's a lot of money, I agree. It's a lot of money, but it is the future. It's where we're going. So public hearing?
If I have another meeting, anything, if I got a chair, y'all can talk all you want.
I do make a motion.
Thank you, have a good one.
I know it's tough, guys. Thank you all. Thank you for showing up on special meeting for us. So we all have a full point to talk about. Yeah. Contract board. Graduation. You want Craig sign a contract?
Yeah, I don't have to sign. But I have to get it today.
Okay, come on.
So anything is that one.
Word on the street, you're like,
No, I heard it.
The only person that said yes was not, the only person that no was wrong. No one else voted.
I made the motion.
I made a motion, but you
I can show you the pictures of what I saw. It's pretty bad.
we've done it. First thing about it, you say that.
Well,
Every month.
and it was gonna be packed up with the prison, and then that went away for a little while, and I know.
So they give you permission.
Victim was.
For this, and you can sign the system. For this.
He might have.
Well,